The heat shimmered above the cracked dirt like a mirage, and in the distance, a dust devil spun lazily near a crooked fence line. Horses snorted, restless in the barn. The preacher wiped sweat from his brow with a trembling hand. And Luke Travis, dressed in a borrowed black coat 2 sizes too big, stood beside a woman 40 years a senior, wondering how the hell he'd ended up here. Henrietta Greaves didn't wear white. She wore black satin and rattlesnake boots. Her hat was tilted low enough to cast a shadow over her sharp eyes, and her voice, when she said, "I do," was steady as gunmetal. The crowd, half of them drunk, the other half just nosy, stood awkwardly around the pasture-turned wedding ground, whispering behind gloved hands and tobacco-stained lips. A string band started playing, but stopped when one of the violin's strings snapped. Someone muttered that it was a bad omen. Luke didn't kiss the bride. She didn't offer. Instead, she turned to the preacher, handed him a sealed envelope, and said, "Mail this to my lawyer. He'll know what to do." Then she looked up at Luke and added, "Let's get this over with." They rode side by side on matching horses, kicking up dust as they moved toward the ranch house in silence. It was a fortress more than a home, iron gates, tall fences, and guards. Not hired hands. Guards. The place sat in the shadow of the canyon, where the sun dipped early and the wind howled long into the night. Inside, she poured herself bourbon, took a long sip, and finally glanced at Luke like he was a stranger who'd sat in her chair. "You married me for the land," she said, not a question. Luke, still standing near the doorway, shrugged. "Maybe I married you because no one else asked." Henrietta laughed short and mean. "You're not wrong, but you're not clever either. I didn't pick you for your wit." He stepped forward. "Then why me?" "You looked like you'd already lost everything. Men like that, they're good at starting over." The ranch's walls were filled with relics. Guns with notches, portraits of angry men with oil-slick mustaches, old maps with faded bloodstains. A mounted cougar glared from the wall above the fireplace, its glass eyes unblinking. Luke stayed in the guest room that first night. The sheets smelled like cedar and gunpowder. He barely slept. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was thick, pressing, like something unsaid was sitting on his chest. Twice he thought he heard footsteps in the hallway. Once, the creak of a door. But when he opened his, no one was there. In town, the gossip spread like wildfire in July. Poor boy's digging for gold. She's buried 5 husbands already. Betty's dead by sundown. At the saloon, Luke nursed a whiskey, ignoring the snickers from behind poker cards. One man leaned in and said, "So how's the honeymoon, Mr. Greaves?" Followed by laughter like the bleating of goats. Luke just stared at him until the man found somewhere else to be. The days passed like horses in a storm, fast and hard, everything a blur of motion and noise. Henrietta never spoke of the past, and Luke didn't ask. She rode out every morning before dawn and came back smelling like dust and secrets. She never told him where she went. On the 7th day, the rain came. The sky darkened early, rumbling low like a beast waking up. Luke stood on the porch, watching the storm roll in. Lightning cracked the sky, illuminating the canyon in flashes. He didn't notice Henrietta wasn't in the house until he heard the gunshot. It was faint, carried by wind and echo, but sharp enough to set the dogs barking. He grabbed his coat and rifle, kicking open the door. Outside, hoof prints in the mud led toward the old path, one that curved behind the canyon cliffs, where nothing lived but scorpions and ghosts. He saddled up, rode fast. By the time he reached the ridge, he saw it, a flickering lantern bobbing through the dark, and beneath it, Henrietta. She moved with purpose, cradling a rifle like an old friend, her face set in stone. He followed at a distance, careful not to make a sound. The canyon walls loomed high on either side, and the wind screamed through the narrow gorge. Rain slicked the stones, making the trail treacherous. But Henrietta didn't hesitate. She turned left at the fork, toward the abandoned silver mine no one dared enter. Luke dismounted and crept forward, boots sliding in the wet gravel. The mine's entrance was half collapsed, choked with vines and rusted wire. Henrietta knelt by the entrance, placing something inside, a package, wrapped in cloth and tied with red twine. She muttered something under her breath, then stood, aiming her rifle into the darkness beyond. That's when she spoke, low and clear. "I know you're in there." Luke froze. She wasn't talking to him. He ducked behind a boulder, peeking out just enough to see her holding position. A gust of wind blew her hat back, revealing her face, hard as dried leather, eyes gleaming with something fierce. Not fear, not regret, something older, like she'd been waiting years for this moment. "Come out," she said, "or I'll burn the whole place down." Nothing answered, not at first. Then came the sound, not footsteps, something else, a dragging, a shifting, like something too big and too slow to be human. Luke's grip tightened on his rifle. Henrietta didn't move. More silence, the kind that gnaws at your spine. Then she turned her head, only slightly, and said, "You can come out now, Luke." He stepped from behind the rock, rifle low but ready. She didn't look surprised, just tired. "You followed me. Seemed like the right night for secrets." She gestured toward the mine. "There's more than secrets in there. What the hell's going on?" Henrietta looked back into the dark, then down at the package. 7 nights. That's how long it takes before the land tries to claim you. Luke frowned. "You mean the mine?" "I mean them." She pointed. "That mine's older than this town. Older than my daddy's bones. Folks used to say it was cursed. I say it's just greedy." Lightning lit the canyon again, and for one terrible moment, Luke thought he saw something in the mine, a shape tall and hunched, with eyes like coals. He blinked. It was gone. Henrietta sighed. "You want to know why I married you?" "Yeah, that'd be nice." "Because I needed someone who wouldn't run." She turned, picked up the lantern, and walked toward the mine. Luke called after her. "What's in there?" She paused at the threshold. "What I've been hiding for 40 years. And then she vanished into the dark. Luke stood alone, rain falling harder now, thunder shaking the cliffs, the scent of smoke already rising from somewhere deep inside the mine. He thought of the wedding, of the look in her eyes, of the way the town laughed, and he finally understood. He hadn't married a woman. He'd married a war. Luke's boots echoed through the mine, each step swallowed by the dark. The air was damp, heavy with the stench of rust, and something older, like the memory of blood. The walls were slick, grooved with time, veins of silver glinting in the lantern light. Somewhere ahead, Henrietta moved with the slow precision of someone who knew every creak and shadow. She didn't wait for him. Luke followed, rifle slung low, every nerve twitching. The deeper he went, the more the world above faded. No wind, no rain, just the claustrophobic silence of the earth's throat, and Henrietta's footsteps, steady as a funeral drum. After what felt like miles, she stopped. A wooden door blocked the tunnel's end, scorched black at the edges and chained shut with thick iron links. Symbols were carved into the wood. Circles, crosses, triangles, faded but deliberate. Henrietta turned, her lantern lifting to meet his eyes. "Don't touch the door," she said. Luke didn't ask why. He just nodded. She reached into her coat and pulled out a ring of keys, worn silver with numbers scratched into them. Each one rattled like old teeth. It took her 3 tries to unlock the chain, and when it fell, it landed with a dull thud that echoed into the depths. She didn't open the door. "Not yet. Before you see it," she said. "You need to understand what you're walking into." Luke leaned against the damp wall, arms folded. "You married me, dragged me into a canyon during a thunderstorm, brought me to a cursed mine, and now you want to give me a history lesson?" She smirked. "I like you better when you're mouthy. Means you ain't scared yet." The lantern flickered as she spoke. "This land belonged to my family long before fences went up. My great-granddaddy struck silver right here, enough to build a whole town. But he found something else too. Gold, yes, but not the kind you spend." She turned and laid a hand flat on the door. They found crates buried deep in a collapsed shaft, sealed in metal, with markings no one recognized. Inside, papers, ledgers, maps, names, dates, blackmail, evidence against every cattle lord, banker, and mayor from here to San Antone. Proof they'd stolen land, rigged courts, murdered to build empires. Luke's brow creased. Why would anyone bury something like that? Because it was dangerous. Too dangerous for court. Too valuable to destroy. So they sealed it in this mine and killed everyone who touched it. She nodded to the door. Go ahead. Open it. Luke hesitated, then stepped forward. The door groaned open on rusted hinges, revealing a chamber lit by a single gas lamp. Dust swirled like ghosts in the beam. Inside, crates stacked floor to ceiling, covered in tarps and oilcloth. A desk stood in the corner, papers still neatly arranged. Maps of Texas, with pins driven into certain towns. In the center, 5 coffins lined the wall. Luke stepped inside, his boots crunching on old bones scattered near the threshold. Henrietta followed, eyes on the coffins. My husband's, she said. All 5 of 'em. Luke turned slowly. You're serious? They all came down here after I told them not to. Greedy men, every last one. Thought they could take the secrets and sell them. One tried to dig up the gold. Another tried to run to the Pinkertons. One even proposed we fake our deaths and disappear with a whole stash. What happened? I shot 2. One hung himself. One slipped on the rocks and split his skull. The last, well, he begged. I left him in the dark. Luke stared at her, unsure whether to be horrified or impressed. Henrietta moved to the desk and picked up a yellowed ledger. These documents could burn half the state to the ground. But you release them, you'd be hunted. They'd send men with stars and guns, and not one of them would be there to uphold the law. Why show me this now? She looked up, and for the first time, Luke saw something crack in her expression. Not weakness, not remorse, just weariness. Because I'm dying, she said, and you're the last one I trust not to be stupid. Luke stepped back. You trust me? I trust that you're broken, and too damn stubborn to run. That's good enough. He looked around the room. The coffins, the crates, the files marked with names and dates. Why not destroy it all? Because the truth matters, even if it kills people. He turned to her. And what do you want from me? Guard it. Learn it. Use it when the time's right. But never for gold. Never for gain. Only to burn down what needs burning. Luke nodded slowly. That all? Henrietta didn't answer. She turned toward the entrance, but paused at the door. There's more, she said. You should see it. They left the chamber and took a side path Luke hadn't noticed before, leading deeper, colder. The air changed, thicker, metallic, laced with decay. Henrietta's lantern cast shadows that danced and swayed across narrow walls. The tunnel opened into another cavern, this one natural, untouched. In the center, under a pile of stones, lay a small wooden box. Henrietta knelt beside it. My father buried this when I was 10. Said it would save us someday. Or damn us. She opened the box. Inside, a revolver, ivory-handled, custom-carved with 7 notches in the barrel. Next to it, a badge, an old U.S. Marshal star, blackened with age. Luke picked it up. Your father was a lawman? He was the law before the law turned rotten. That gun's killed men who tried to erase the past. Now it's yours. He stared at the weapon, felt the weight of it in his hand. I don't know if I'm that kind of man, he said. Henrietta smiled faintly. You will be. They walked back in silence, leaving the past in its grave for now. By the time they reached the mine's mouth, the rain had stopped. The stars had returned, sharp and clear. A coyote howled in the distance. Luke breathed deep, the air lighter now, but his shoulders heavier. Back at the ranch, Henrietta poured 2 glasses of bourbon. Her hands trembled as she handed him one. I don't have long, she said. Weeks, maybe less. Is it sickness? She shook her head. Something older. A curse, maybe, or just time catching up. She drank deep, then said, The men who want that mine, they're still out there, and they know I'm weak. They'll come soon. Luke downed the bourbon in one gulp. Let them. Henrietta chuckled, the sound dry and thin. You'll need help. There's a man in Bitter Ridge. Name's Elijah Ward. Ex-preacher. Knows more about this than I do. He used to ride with my father. Now he drinks himself blind. Luke nodded. I'll find him. Henrietta stood, suddenly weary, her strength cracking beneath the weight. She reached into her coat again, pulled out a folded map, yellow with age and creased like an old wound. This shows the full extent of the tunnels, and the safe house, and the traps. If they come use this. Luke unfolded it. In the bottom corner, in faded ink, a signature, Marshall R. Greaves. He looked at her. You really planning to die soon? Henrietta met his gaze without flinching. No, cowboy. I'm planning to kill someone first. She turned away, walking toward the staircase that led to her room. Her boots echoed in the stillness, each step measured. Luke stood alone with the map, the bourbon glass in one hand, and the pass in the other. He didn't feel poor anymore. He felt armed. And as the wind returned to howl through the canyon once more, he understood. He hadn't inherited a ranch. He'd inherited a war. The first bullet came through the kitchen window. It shattered the glass and slammed into the stone wall, inches from where Luke was cleaning a rifle. He dropped instinctively, rolled to the side, and came up with the barrel aimed toward the porch. Another shot hit the front door, splintering wood. Then silence. Luke exhaled, slow and controlled. It had begun. Henrietta appeared in the hallway, already holding her shotgun, slippers swapped for boots, silk nightgown tucked into leather trousers. Her face was pale but fierce. They came early, she said, almost amused. Always thought cowards like to wait until dawn. Luke peered through the cracked window. 3 riders, wide-brimmed hats, dark coats, rifles slung low. More figures moved in the trees beyond the pasture. Maybe a dozen, maybe more. They're flanking, he muttered. Henrietta nodded. You take the south fence. They'll come from there first. I'll handle the barn. Luke didn't argue. He grabbed his rifle, the ivory-handled revolver, and a box of cartridges. Before heading out, he paused. Henrietta, he said, no hero stunts. She smiled crookedly. Too late for that. The ranch was quiet, the kind of quiet before a rattlesnake strikes. Luke sprinted across the muddy field, crouching low behind a feed cart. He reached the south fence just as 2 men approached on foot, rifles raised, eyes scanning. They didn't see him. He waited until they were 10 paces from the gate, then fired twice. The first dropped without a sound. The second screamed, staggered back, and returned fire, wild and high. Luke fired again. Silence followed. A third man rose from the brush behind them. Too late. Luke spun and fired, catching him in the shoulder. The man collapsed, cursing in Spanish. The smell of gunpowder coated the wind. From the direction of the barn came a thunderous boom. Luke looked up to see smoke rising. Another boom. Henrietta's doing. She'd rigged the moonshine still. A makeshift grenade launcher built from copper piping, matches, and old dynamite. Luke had laughed when she showed him. He wasn't laughing now. He moved toward the barn's edge, bullets zipping past his ears. One grazed his arm, a burning kiss through the sleeve. He didn't stop. He slid behind a water trough, returned fire, and caught another attacker in the leg. The man fell, howling, dropping his weapon. Henrietta was standing in the barn doorway, gun braced on a stack of hay bales, calmly picking off targets. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. Luke could see the blood on her sleeve, the stiff way she held her side. She'd taken a hit. He ran to her, crouched beside the bales. You all right? He asked. Just a scratch, she muttered, though her face was white. How many left? Too many. Luke peeked out. The rest were regrouping behind the cattle pens, setting fire to the haystacks to smoke them out. Flames licked at the sky, casting long shadows. They want us to burn, Henrietta said. Luke gritted his teeth. Let's make it expensive. She tossed him a satchel of shells. Basement's got dynamite. Under the floorboards. I hid it back in '62, when the war ended. He raised a brow. The Civil War? I planned for a long retirement, she said, then coughed. Blood on her lip. Luke hesitated. Go, she said. I'll hold them. He ran. Inside the house. Smoke already leaked through the walls. He kicked through the parlor, pulled up the rug, and pried open the hidden panel beneath the piano. Crates marked with faded army stamps sat in the dark. He grabbed 2 bundles of dynamite and wire, tucked them into his coat, and ran back. Outside, chaos. The barn was ablaze now. Henrietta gone from view. Gunfire barked from every direction. Luke kept low, weaving between structures, heart pounding. He spotted 3 men storming the porch, one tossing a bottle of fire through the door. Luke raised a rifle and fired once. The bottle exploded midair, flames spilling harmlessly onto the steps. He hit another man in the shoulder. The third ran, disappearing into the trees. He reached the side of the house and found Henrietta collapsed behind a barrel, breathing shallow. "Chest," she gasped. "Don't let them take it. Don't let them. Save it," Luke said, dragging her into the cellar. He laid her gently on a bed of sacks. "Just rest." She grabbed his hand with a grip that defied her condition. "There's a safe behind the old mirror in my room. Inside is the trigger." He didn't ask questions, just nodded and ran. Back upstairs, he could barely see through the smoke. He stumbled into her bedroom, knocked over the mirror, and found the steel safe behind it. The code was carved into the frame. Smart woman. Inside, a single device cobbled together from wires, a battery, and what looked like a pocket watch. Luke grabbed it, returned to the cellar. Henrietta hadn't moved. "I'm not going to make it," she said. "You are." "No," she said. "But you are." He sat beside her. "I ain't the hero," he muttered. Henrietta coughed again. "Neither was I." Outside, more shouting. More shots. "Take the tunnel out back. It leads to the gorge. I'm not leaving you. You will if you want this to matter." He looked down at her, at the fading light in those eyes. She smiled weakly. "I never needed saving, Luke. I needed remembering." Then she closed her eyes. He waited. 1 breath. 2. Gone. He stood slowly, eyes burning, then picked up the detonator and the bag of ledgers she prepared. He found a tunnel door, a narrow crawl space hidden behind wine racks, and slipped into the dark. The passage was tight, winding, lit only by a sliver of moonlight at the far end. Behind him, the ranch was consumed. Flames devoured everything. He emerged on the canyon's edge, wind howling around him. He turned, raised the device, and pressed a switch. A tremor rolled through the ground like thunder. Then a blast. A second. A third. The earth roared. Fire blossomed high into the night as the ranch, the mine, the secrets, the blood, collapsed into itself. And Henrietta with it. Luke stood for a long time, jaw tight, fists clenched. The wind picked up. From the distance, the town lights flickered, unaware of the war that had just ended, or just begun. He turned away from the ruins, map tucked under his coat, the revolver heavy on his hip. Somewhere in Bitter Ridge, an old preacher waited, and Luke had work to do. Dust clung to Luke's coat as he rode into Bitter Ridge, the town barely awake beneath a slate-gray sky. The streets were quiet, but he could feel eyes behind every shutter, breath held behind every curtain. His horse, Ghost, moved slow, deliberate, as if it too sensed the weight he carried. The memory of the ranch still burned behind his eyes. The smoke, the fire, the last gasp Henrietta gave before fading into legend. He hadn't spoken since it happened. There was nothing left to say. The war she'd warned him about had taken her, but it hadn't finished the job. Not yet. The church stood at the far end of town, leaning slightly to one side like an old drunk who'd seen too much. Luke tied his horse to the post and walked through the squealing doors. It smelled of must and whiskey. Inside sat a man with silver in his beard and rust in his eyes. He wore a preacher's collar and a gambler's smirk, and in his hand was a flask labeled simply, "Truth." "You're late," the man said without looking up. "Henrietta told me you'd come days ago." "She's dead," Luke replied. The man's eyes finally lifted. "Then you're early. This war moves faster than it used to." Luke stepped forward, unbuttoned his coat, and dropped the map, ledgers, and detonator on the pew beside the old preacher. "Elijah Ward?" Luke asked. The preacher nodded. "I was. Then I saw what's in those papers. Now I'm just a man trying not to get shot." "Luke, Saturday. She said you'd know what to do." Elijah thumbed through the documents, his face going pale as he recognized names, deeds, death orders signed in bold ink and blood. Good Lord, he muttered. These could topple half the state. They nearly toppled her, Luke said. She gave her life for that pile. Said it wasn't about gold. It was about memory. Justice. Same thing, depending on who you ask. Luke leaned forward. I want to burn the roots. I want every man connected to this to feel what she felt when they took her family, her land, her youth, and I want them to know it was me. Elijah met his eyes. Then I hope you like running. Because once we light this fire, we'll never stop. I'm not running. I'm hunting. Elijah took a long swig from his flask. Then we start with Plainview. The ride to Plainview Gorge took 2 days and 1 knife fight in a saloon outside Wilkers Pass. Word traveled fast out here. Too fast. Men were already asking questions about Greaves Ranch, about the explosion, about the last man seen riding away with smoke at his back. They reached the gorge by nightfall. The rocks were black as coal, sharp-edged like broken promises. At the bottom sat a cabin half swallowed by earth, its door tilted open like a crooked grin. This the place? Elijah asked, spitting into the dust. Luke nodded. Henrietta said it held the rest of the story. The floorboards creaked as they stepped inside. Dust swirled in their wake. On the mantel, a photo, Henrietta and her father, younger than Luke had ever seen her, standing beside a mule loaded with crates stamped U.S. military property. Below the photo, a trunk, locked, rusted, and branded with a family crest. Greaves. Luke pried it open with the butt of his revolver. Inside were journals, maps, a badge, and a black envelope sealed with wax. He opened it. The letter was dated 1873, written by Marshall R. Greaves. To whoever reads this, know this truth. The war never ended. It simply changed uniforms. The men who stole this land didn't do it with guns. They did it with ink, with lies. If you found this letter, I've failed to finish what I started. But maybe someone still will. Below the letter was a list, 47 names. Every one of them had land, power, money, and everyone had blood on their hands. Luke looked up. You know any of them? Elijah scanned the list. Every single one. They're not cattle barons anymore. They're judges, senators, bankers. Their grandsons own railroads. Their great-grandsons were metals. Luke folded the list, tucked it in his coat. Then we ride. Over the next week, names turned to ashes. Luke and Elijah moved like ghosts through towns and courtrooms. They printed papers in the dead of night, mailed evidence to every newspaper from Austin to Cheyenne. Judges were cornered on porches with ledgers in their laps. Sheriffs woke to find deeds posted on their jail walls, signed in ink and attached to photos of long-dead men in shallow graves. Some folded. Others fought. One morning, outside Rustback, Luke found a man waiting by the well. Clean suit. No dust on his boots. He held out a cigar. You Travis? Luke didn't answer. The man smiled. I represent men who would like to buy your silence. Handsomely, Luke drew the revolver Henrietta left him and pressed it to the man's chest. I represent a woman who died screaming because your bosses wanted secrets buried. The man's smile faded. You won't survive this. I don't plan to. He left the man shaking, pants wet, boots muddy. The fire was catching now. Townsfolk started whispering. Old debts were being called in. Young men stared harder at their fathers. And the name Henrietta Greaves, once a punchline, was now spoken like a curse or a prayer. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Plainview's mayor was a man named Marcus Hale, descendant of the same Hale who stole Greaves' land in the first place. His mansion overlooked the gorge. Marble steps, silk curtains, pink roses that never wilted. Luke approached alone. Inside, Hale poured brandy into crystal, humming. When Luke kicked the door open, the man didn't flinch. I wonder when you'd come. Luke leveled a revolver. You know why I'm here. Hale sat, crossed his legs. Your vendetta is poetic. I'll grant you that. But it's over. You've made noise, rattled cages. But nothing changes. The rich die rich. The poor die quiet. That's the law of the land. Luke walked forward. Henrietta Greaves says hello. He dropped the photo on the desk. Hale glanced at it, froze. His own signature beside a date. 1892, a hanging order for Henrietta's brother, age 17. She was a child, Luke said. You killed her soul before you ever touched her land. She killed men, too, Hale said. She buried demons. Luke raised a revolver. Hale laughed. Go ahead, outlaw. You shoot me, and every paper will call you a killer. But if you walk out that door, maybe, just maybe, you'll survive long enough to matter. Luke hesitated. Then he reached into his coat and dropped a bound manuscript on the desk. Already printed. Already mailed. You're just the last domino. Hale's smile vanished. Luke turned, walked to the door. You think you're different, Hale snarled. You're not. The land swallows everyone. Just wait. Luke paused at the threshold. I've seen the land eat good men, he said. But Henrietta Greaves? She became the storm. He left the mansion as bells rang in town. Warnings, alarms. Truth roaring down cobblestone streets like thunder. Weeks passed. Elijah disappeared into the hills with the last of the ledgers. Luke rode alone, sometimes into towns that cheered, sometimes into ones that spat, sometimes just into silence. One dawn, he returned to the gorge. He dismounted, walked to the old cabin, and sat by the grave he'd carved with his own hands. The stone read, Henrietta Greaves, widow, warrior, memory. He poured bourbon on the dirt and lit a match. The flames crackled. You were right, he whispered. They didn't see it coming. He stood, turned toward the horizon, and rode on,